You're welcome, everybody, to With Thunder's Applause, a podcast where two friends get together and talk about the events and ideas that'll shape our uncertain future. I am your host, Steve, along with my co host, Zach. Zach Baca, what is up?
Nothing.
Working.
Nothing much. I fucking did way too much physical labor today, pounding steaks in to train the tomatoes up because the bamboo broke, and then cleaning out the turtle tank. Thing was fucking like 50 gallons or something like that. So it takes forever to drain, and then you gotta lift it up with still some water and all the rock at the bottom. And I just spent like an hour cleaning just all the rocks off, because I don't want to throw the rocks away. So I
You
got to put
got
them
your
into
rocks
a
off?
sieve, blast them all. Yep, I got my rocks off. And then fucking cleaning the actual filter and the pump takes forever as well. Like, and aquarium shit. If you want a chore, get
You
an
got to get
aquarium,
one of them
y'all.
siphon pumps where, like, to initiate it, you just like fucking
I
shake
have
weights
that.
and
I
shit.
have that. Yeah. Yeah. I did that
Does
today.
it work?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you just
It
use it to suck up the shit.
there's like different qualities. The one I have is really cheap, and the valve gets caught sometimes, either closed or shut. Like today, it was closed shut. That's never happened before. I was just like, what the fuck? Um, yeah, good day though. Physically active. Had to shower twice.
Fuck you, bro.
What do you got?
Fucking big ass spider, bro. And I
Uh,
blew at him and he fronted. He like ran up on me and was like, "What, bitch?" And I was like, "Whoa."
oh no, he likes my
And I
carbon
hope I
dioxide.
squished him. He's gonna run up my fucking leg and bite me.
Yeah, man.
But he looked like a daddy long legs, but not quite the same.
Hmm.
Because I'm still in Coeur d'Alene, or technically I'm in like Hayden, Idaho. It's one of the communities in the metro area for Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah,
Um, Still working, not working right now, obviously.
yeah.
That's why my lighting is shit, and I'm on a fucking MacBook, so audio quality and video quality is probably
That's surprising
low.
to me. That's surprising to me. I always hear that like Mac products are all about the visual stuff, so I expected it to be probably like 1080p and all that shit. That's really weird.
At any
Have you lit?
rate, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
outside. I'm in Idaho. It was fucking. It's going okay. It was a super stormy today. Um, there's like thunderstorms. It got up to like it was gusting up to like 40 fucking knots, which is like windy. A knot, I think, is slightly more than a mile an hour.
Yeah, like 1.2 or something like that.
Yeah, 1.16, I want to say.
Uh, yeah. So 46 miles per hour. Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty fucking gnarly.
Yellow. One knot is 1.15. Yep. Learn something every day.
1.15.
At 1.15.
Yep, that was
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. Well, it's been so long, but yeah, everything's measured in knots on submarines and ships and shit. So
Yeah, and in aviation too, which aviation borrows a lot from oceanic travel and
yeah.
distances and all that stuff. I think the I don't know what the fundamental difference is, but I just kind of take it as like the imperial versus the
Yeah. I think
metric or whatever.
Yeah, I think knots is even older, and it was like there was some standardization. What they told me in the Navy
Literally
anyway,
based
of
on like
like
a physical
tying
measurement.
knots in ropes and yeah, measuring how many knots you're putting out. Yeah, and
Yeah.
somehow that got standardized. Like not only was it used, but it eventually got standardized. And they're like, no, 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 it probably started off as some guy's arm length, and then they're like, okay, now the guy who makes the knots has to be has to have that same reach.
Yeah, it winds up being, approximation. It's about the same. It's a little
Yeah,
more, but yeah, it's a at 40, it's a 6 mile difference, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
just I mean significant.
It starts to get substantial at that point for sure.
Yeah, but like the difference between 10 statute miles and 10 nautical miles is minimal.
Yeah.
It's basically like one extra, right? Like 10 statute
4.5, yeah.
or 11 nautical miles is 10 statute miles or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yo.
Yeah, I don't really get it, but you know, I also don't understand why we use fucking 12 inches to a foot. It makes no fucking sense. But then yet we use a yard, and a yard is, for all intents and purposes, a meter.
A dozen kind of makes you wonder if someone was like trying to count. They're like, okay, 10, and they're like, left foot, right foot, 12. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, probably. At any rate, we're doing another stream. It's usually Monday. We usually do something kind of interesting. But because I am amongst coworkers, among others, I was like, maybe
Probably
let's
don't want to
not talk about Ted Kaczynski.
I don't want to freak these people out.
I don't want to freak people out. I mean, I just mentioned, like, they're like, you notice how there's no homeless people here? It's because it's cold. And I was like, I mean, you guys were literally looking at housing, and you can get like a fucking 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom house for like $500,000, or you can get a fucking 2-bedroom, 1-bath mobile, like single wide fucking trailer,
Yeah,
on a lot or whatever for like 110,000. Like, it's definitely housing costs. Like,
yeah.
no, it's not. No, it's not. And I'm like, I almost stepped up and I was like, between the 5 of us at this table, I guarantee hands down, I've spent A, more time interacting with homeless people and asking them questions, and B, spent far more time reading various government and nonprofit reports on this issue. I promise you, I am the most knowledgeable person at the table on this issue. They just actually, and I almost included it, but we've talked about the issue so much I didn't want to. But a recent study came out. I think it was a qualitative study. They interviewed 6,500, I think, unhoused people in California.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, like 2/3 of them are like old people, and like, 90% of them became homeless living in California. They didn't move here, right? Like,
Right. The only people
like,
moving here are from Florida, sent by DeSantis.
perhaps. And then a lot of it was like, yeah, they became homeless here, and like a lot of it was because they like had someone in their household lost an income and they couldn't afford rent.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Which checks with the conversations I've had with unhoused people.
Yeah. And
Like,
everybody's just slowly getting priced out, like your rent goes up 10%. You don't automatically get a 10% raise at work. So
yeah, and one of these days we'll go over the OOR, I think, out of reach study, which basically is like an interactive map tool which shows you like how many hours of minimum wage you'd have to work in every fucking zip code
yeah.
to be able to afford a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment.
Yeah.
And it's something like you have to work 100 hours, 110 hours a week.
Yeah, you mentioned that last week too.
Which has a higher minimum wage. And then you're like, okay, go to a place with a lower minimum wage, and you still have to work like 90 hours, 100 hours a week to fucking afford a place.
Minimum wage in Idaho, $7.25 an hour. All right, you're in one of those federal minimum wage states.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's no fucking there's no urban planning whatsoever. It reminds me of fucking Texas in that way. And then like, how did they approve this fucking monstrosity? And it's like, oh, there's literally no plan. They just let people do whatever the fuck they want. Which then they say, oh, that's cheaper housing. But you're like, okay, that might be a contributing factor, but it's also more expensive for individuals because you have to drive like 8 fucking miles to run an errand.
Yeah. And that is, dude, it's like that in a lot of places where just no centralized, like the only time that happens is when you get several people who move in like near the same time in an area. And then it's like, okay, cool. Now there's like people who need services.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, we're just going to do a real short show tonight, less than an hour. We're already 15 minutes in, which is bizarre.
We're 10 minutes in.
Okay, whatever. I don't know. I've had a few beers by now.
Oh, lucky.
Lucky me. I'm drinking an Elysian Field Space Dust.
Nice. As we were saying earlier, those are a pretty good one because they're relatively cheap and high ABV. So
Yeah, it's like 8.2. It's fucking a heady ass beer.
yeah,
Dude.
it's a little monster there.
And I'm going to tell you something that's probably fucking too much for our fucking live stream. Man, like, I don't know.
What's
I
that?
just, I, my GI tract feels better drinking beer
Yeah,
than bourbon.
yeah, yeah. I can agree with that because
It's weird
the
because you
pure
think,
alcohol is just like meh. It
yeah,
kills
and
everything.
like people think that fucking beer makes you feel bloated, but when I wake up in the morning, like I don't feel bloated. Whereas like if I'm drinking, and granted, I drink like mostly I drink bourbon with fucking sugar, right?
Mhm.
Like bourbon and apple juice. And then looking at how much sugar's in apple juice, it's fucking astronomical. In fact, I was telling Brooke, I'm like, when I drink beer, I actually lose weight. Like if I drink beer for 2 or 3 days, I will weigh 5 pounds fewer than if I was drinking fucking bourbon and apple juice.
I tried vodka and
Like tonic water or
no
fucking
ginger ale, like a zero carb ginger
zero
ale.
calorie. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay.
Not overly sweet. Yeah, it makes a pretty good mixer. It's expensive because there's only like one or two companies that make it, and they don't come in 2 liters. You got to buy them by the 6 pack. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, if you're not mixing in that much, you're good.
Yeah. So we're just going to do a quick thing. A report came out, I think last week about and of course the press more recently over the last week has been like, oh God, the government's planning geoengineering. And we're going to talk about that on the second half of the show. But the first half of the show, I came across this article about Sarah Silverman and two authors in a joint lawsuit against OpenAI and ChatGPT.
Yep.
And they're suing them for fucking copyright infringement. So I think, and then I was like, well, I want to do this geoengineering thing. And this AI thing came up. And I said, oh, that's appropriate because they're both kind of tech related. They kind of are both in this kind of like late stage capitalism kind of realm where like not only are we dealing with like the social and creative contradictions of these technologies, but also dealing with the very real kind of um, consequences of fossil fuel and industrial technologies, and now realizing that we're past the point of no return on 1.5. We're probably looking at more like
Yeah.
3 or 4 degrees C. Government stopped even like the United States government is essentially stopped talking about like halting climate emissions, and now they're like, well, fuck, there's no political way to fucking cut carbon emissions, so let's figure out if we can like stop global warming and climate change in other ways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, really, it just boils down to people don't want to give up their perks, and so it's easy. It's literally easier to like put a reflective mirror in space than it is to convince people to turn off the AC for even a minute.
Yeah. In the mirror, we're going to have one article. I think it's Christian Science Monitor just did like a really simple, like pro con of the
Yeah,
various kind of geoengineering technologies that are being like floated. And I thought it was great. And they brought up solar reflection, which is Guy McPherson is a kind of climate doomer guy. He's a biologist, professor emeritus at University of Arizona, someone I met in person at a peak oil conference, and like has kind of been proselytizing this concept of near term human extinction. Um, and the mirror reflection framework is the only solution that he's like ever kind of said, like, because he usually is like, they say they want to do this and that's bullshit because XYZ, and they say they want to do this and it's bullshit because XYZ, and then he's like, the mirror reflection framework based on my reading of the science like is probably the most effective
yeah.
means of addressing this problem, even though it's like the least financially viable.
It is the least impact on the planet and the only way it goes wrong is if it like stops functioning properly, and then all that CO2 is still in the atmosphere, and your heat source goes back to where it was. And so, like, as long as you keep it functioning properly, you're good. But yeah,
Yeah.
all the other stuff, like, oh, we're gonna put, like aerosols up in the air. It's like, well, eventually they fall out, and so you just have to keep doing that more and more often in a
Yeah. And
plane.
yeah.
We discussed this before, in a plane. So you burn in a whole bunch of
Not
fuel
all
just
of
to
them
get
are in
there.
a plane. Actually,
Oh,
two of them are boat based, and we're going to get into that a
oh,
little bit later. But let's
yeah,
start with some AI and
yeah,
this lawsuit. And we just have articles today, no videos. Honestly, a lot of the stuff you're gonna the kind of um just really kind of short explains what it is, blah blah blah, is gonna
yeah.
not be with some person like pontificating. We are the pontificators, god damn it. Uh,
So
Go
looks
ahead.
like, well, I was just, this right off the bat sounds familiar because there's already been cases against AI art for the same reason, and that is that the companies that are creating these AIs are training them on not necessarily like open data, but data that is online. And so a lot of times you get like people's books and art and stuff like that that is not like Creative Commons or anything like that, but it's still being trained on.
Yeah, and I think you might have mentioned it in a previous show or we talked about it elsewhere
Yeah,
that like sometimes AI picture generators will like literally have like copyright watermarks like
yeah,
Getty
yeah,
Images.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember talking about that on the picture. Yeah, because they're like, oh yeah, well that goes with every leg or whatever.
Because they just pull from the fucking internet and put it together. So anyway, let's get into this. So
So
Sarah
Sarah Silverman.
Silverman is a not very funny comedian, but very well known and popular. She's not fucking funny. I've watched some of her stand-up specials and she's fucking garbage.
Mm,
And like, I don't want to be sexist, but like, there's one
well,
woman
gonna be.
comedian, I forget her name. She's blonde and she's younger and she's primarily making her name and building her reputation via like TikTok and YouTube shorts. I forget her name, but she's genuinely fucking funny. And like other than that, there are very few women comedians I find funny because I watch like comedy a lot on YouTube and TikTok, and there's stuff that comes up, and I'm like, this is okay. But generally speaking, women are not funny, and Sarah Silverman is one of those. She's rich because she's
I don't want to be.
popular.
I, I would like to harken back to the statement that you prefaced all of this, and that was, "I don't want to be sexist, but so."
Okay, right. And then I've been told don't use the word but or the conjunction but, use the conjunction and. I'm not sexist, and it's okay to say Sarah Silverman is not
It's not
fucking
funny.
funny.
Yeah, funny is
Um,
based upon what you find funny. I can't
well,
remember. I don't think I've ever seen any of her stand-ups. Is the thing. I think I've only seen her on movies and TV shows. So I have no idea what she's like outside
yeah.
of like group writing.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned that when they're trying to find like a Daily Show replacement host, she hosted some, and you thought that she
Yeah,
did a pretty good job. And
yeah.
and I could see in that environment her doing okay, but I watched one of her stand-ups and she's like, "I'm a Jap, a Jewish American princess. Ha 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 ha." And I was like, I don't think you're funny. And there's a lot of Jews I think that are funny, and I don't think you're fucking funny. And I don't think your fucking jokes are funny. And it's just like I'm just here like kind of like being crass, and it's like, "Oh, I'm controversial because I'm a woman, but I'm also like
Mm,
saying really fucking fucked up crass shit." I'm like, "You're just not funny." Like, you want to see funny, like look at someone like fucking Bill Burr or like someone like that where you're like, "Holy shit, like you're just fucking nonstop hilarious."
yeah. Or
Um,
blonde lady on TikTok, whoever that
or
is.
Blonde Lady on TikTok. And Blonde Lady on TikTok also talks a lot about relationships,
Mm,
but she's very funny when she does it. And like a lot of it is her delivery too. And I think Sarah Silverman is just to the point where she's like filthy fucking rich. And like a lot of what
yeah.
turned me off to Sarah Silverman was prior to 2016.
Mhm.
Um, but then 2016 she backed Bernie, and then like Hollywood and all of her fucking rich friends came after her And then she just backpedaled and was like, "I love Hillary Clinton and I love Joe Biden and blah, blah, blah." I think
Mm,
she actually spoke at a Democratic National Convention. I think it might have been in 2016. She spoke at they had her come speak at the DNC to try and convince young people to back Hillary Clinton after fucking they fucked Bernie.
mm,
And I'm like, if you can't see through that shit and you agreed to go there, and like it's like in 2020, she was like begging. She's like, you all need to vote for Joe Biden because Trump is evil. And it's like, is Trump evil, or is it just you don't want to fucking piss off your friends? Like, and you don't want to go fucking out for fucking, cocktails, or go to a wine bar and be sipping wine with your friends and have your friends complaining to you that you were the responsible for fucking this thing that they think is fucking terrible, which is like not fundamentally different than what existed before, right? Um
yeah,
anyway, I don't really like her, and now she's pulling a fucking Lars Ulrich. If y'all remember
yeah,
when Metallica sued fucking Napster and shut Napster down, that's when
yeah.
Napster ceased to exist. Napster and LimeWire and like the Millennium Digital Copyright Act and all of the other stuff that like really kind of exploded intellectual property rights in the digital age. Um, that was Metallica that did that. That was their fucking fault. They were the
Right.
ones that fucked up this thing that was going to like liberate content. And they said, no, that belongs to me. And it's like, okay, pay yourself money for all your studio time. Pay yourself well. Pay yourself 8 times more than another skilled person gets paid. Like a plumber or an electrician, skilled trade is maybe getting paid 40, 45, $60 an hour maybe. If
Hmm.
they own their own shop, they might pay themselves $60 an hour. And they're like, "No, I want all of the money I'm entitled to, period, end of story. I am not a wage worker. I didn't spend time in the studio at $100 an hour. I'm entitled to everything. I want my fucking hundreds of millions of dollars because I'm a greedy piece of shit. And now I'm out of touch." Even though like I made my career, same with Sarah Silverman. I made my career in this space where like people gravitated towards me because of whatever reason. And I'm like, yeah, people 20 years ago liked my shit. And now I want you, new people who don't really like my shit and they want to see it to see that they don't like my shit. I want you to pay me millions of dollars too. And it's just, I don't think anybody should be that fucking rich, period, and let alone a fucking creative. Like, go ahead, like, especially in the context of like the writer's strike, and you have all these people who do a lot of work and they don't get compensated for it. And yeah, and I understand that because they're concerned about their job, but those people are not going to be Sarah Silverman rich, even though I guarantee they put in more hours and more sweat equity into the work they do. And all they do is get like some residuals. And all they're like, well, you're selling this a lot more in different ways. I want residuals from these new ways you're selling it. Because I used to only get residuals from DVD sales. Now I want residuals from fucking streaming sales. And Sarah Silverman's like, this AI looked at a book I wrote and is able to recall information from this book I wrote. And I don't like it. They used my book to train their AI. I don't like, as you will see, it isn't. And other qua somewhat illegal. Summarize real quick. You know who also summarizes books? The New York Review of fucking books. And guess what? They sell a magazine where they summarize other people's books. But okay, carry on. Yeah, so they're saying that ChatGPT summarized our book, but didn't also say, "Hey, this is from copyrighted material."
Yeah, it didn't have the thing at the bottom. Let's see. The complaint lays out in steps why the plaintiffs believe the data sets have illicit origins. Let's see. They made a paper detailing a Yama. The company points to the sources for its training data sets, one of which is called The Pile, which is just a whole bunch of private tracker uh, torrents, basically.
They call them shadow libraries.
Yeah, it's a common term. Let's see. But it does actually sound kind of cool. All right, Mom, I'm going to go to the Shadow Library. Enjoy a dark art, son. In both claims, the authors say they did not consent to the use of their copyrighted books. I
As
mean,
training material.
yeah, as training material. Um, let's see, 6 counts, blah blah blah. Who cares about that? 3 authors.
They also didn't consent to me taking a book I found in a fucking free library
Uh-huh.
and using it as toilet paper because it was fucking garbage.
Well, the
And
big
guess what?
problem.
Try and sue me for that because like it's literally just shit now.
In well, either way, I mean, your point started off, with the idea of just passing the data on for free. Because once you have a book, if you no longer need the book because you have it memorized, you could just pass it on to someone else. Totally fine, totally legal.
You
Uh,
can summarize it
but
all you want.
yeah, people go to book clubs where this is done.
And you don't have to cite it.
But on that's true. But maybe they should start. But on the level of the internet is where these people are coming from. So I get that. They're like, oh, my work can be distributed far and wide, like, and nobody's going to the library even to borrow the book because they can just get it online easier. So, I mean, I can see that there's the scale of it, and
Yeah, but still at the scale, a popular library, they buy one copy of a book for 12 fucking bucks, and then like hundreds and hundreds of people read it.
yeah,
Are they
exactly.
doing libraries for lost book sales? No,
Mm.
they're not. And this, they're not even fucking reproducing the work in the same way that. Are you going to sue all the fucking FedExes because someone wants to go run a fucking chapter of your book off on a photocopier?
Oh, and
No,
ship it.
they're
Yeah.
saying, oh, like our book was one of, I don't quote me, and this article doesn't say it, but my understanding, these like learning models that the AI uses is like millions and millions and millions of data points. So your book is a fucking drop of water in the ocean.
Right. And what I found interesting is it doesn't sound like they cited anything aside from the summary of like, oh, it straight up stole from us. It sounds like really it's just it did the job of it basically, did the job of someone or a book reviewer and did it for free, and that's upsetting to them. I don't quite get it.
That's what I don't understand. And I hope that it gets struck down. I'm not going to read that entire
No, one of
brief.
17. That's crazy.
I did read the first couple paragraphs that established like the brief. If you scroll through that, you can kind of see the first paragraph, the
Oh
legal
yeah,
document there. Yeah. That's the actual suit that was filed. And
yeah.
I'm glad that they put the actual text of it in there so you can see it yourself.
Yeah. Please feel
And
free.
you know what I hope? I hope that fucking AI takes the text of that legal case and like incorporates it into its learning model.
The constant feedback loop. Yeah, I bet it will be. Let's see. There's no half the defendants.
Plaintiffs
Yeah.
allege somewhere
Hmm.
direct copyright infringement. They literally said
Vicarious.
they don't reproduce paragraphs. They don't
Vicarious.
reproduce whole chapters. They literally just used the words, the way they constructed words to learn for a computer to learn how the English language is constructed to make it more effective at answering questions in English or whatever language, right? Like that's how I understand a language learning model for like AI and stuff. And I'm not fucking I think AI is like not as big of a threat as some people think it is. Mostly because like it takes fossil fuel infrastructure to run servers and shit. Like I don't think it's going to take over.
You want to see?
Especially when we black out the sun like they did in fucking the Matrix. And we're going to talk about a little later about blocking out the sun.
Before we do, would you like to see a summary of her book from ChatGPT?
Yes. This is off the cuff. This is real shooting the Poodoo style shit.
This is shooting the Poodoo.
So
There we
ChatGPT
go.
summarize Sarah Silverman's book.
You want to go ahead?
I can't read it.
Oh, okay.
Let me see. Hold on.
I can probably make it bigger.
Yeah. Bedwetter is a memoir written by comedian Sarah Silverman, written in 2010. The book provides an intimate and candid account of Silverman's life, focusing on her experiences growing up as a bedwetter and the challenges. That's interesting, but okay. Silverman shares personal stories, blah, blah, blah. Behind her bedwetting, she delves into other aspects of her life. While Bedwetter touches on serious themes such as insecurity, vulnerability, and societal expectations, she infuses her signature wit, humor. They didn't reproduce anything. That's a book review.
Yeah.
And guess what else? Guess who else does it? Book reviews. Every fucking newspaper, every like indie fucking publication, newspaper, website, whatever. Whether it's an esteemed book review, like a book review in an academic journal, or a book review in like the New York Times review of books or whatever, like they didn't reproduce anything. You know what that sounded like? That sounded like the back of the jacket text.
Probably.
No, seriously, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
This book is about vulnerability and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's the kind of shit that the publisher puts on the fucking back of the book.
Yeah.
So how are you going to claim direct copyright infringement for that?
I like that they haven't even bothered to like disable that yet. They're just like, that's cool.
Wait, before jumping to geo-engineering, go back to ChatGPT.
Oh, okay.
Ask it the question. What is on page 10 of Sarah Silverman's book?
Oh. Question. Hold on, let me type. Chat.
I don't have real-time access to specific books or their contents.
Okay, well that's interesting.
The ability to browse the internet or access specific book pages, therefore I'm unable.
Oh boy.
Oh.
This is an old book. And we're just burning it up, get compute cycles here. Oh no.
I mean,
copyrighted works.
I want to take this screenshot and submit it as an amicus brief on behalf of OpenAI. No, seriously, the whole conversation, screenshot that shit.
Yeah.
And we'll send an amicus brief on behalf of OpenAI and be like, yo, listen, I saw this article and I wanted to see, and this is what it said. So how can you fucking claim direct? I mean, you can say like, hey, I don't like that my material was like compiled and used to train a computer program, but that is fundamentally different than direct copyright infringement, which is the exact text of the fucking lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
That's the argument they're making to the fucking court. they're making the argument to the court that their intellectual property was stolen.
Yeah.
And then you go to the fucking thing, they say stole their intellectual property. And not only did it not steal their intellectual property, it's not even stealing old intellectual property.
Dude's been dead for like a decade or more now. Come on, man. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's 99 years. The US has like some of the worst IP law in the world.
Okay. Disney's
It's
never
fucking
going
absurd.
away.
So anyway, I think we've completely debunked Sarah Silverman is not funny. And she's also not very
I liked her in the
smart.
shows, but hey, whatever.
What's that?
I said I liked her in the shows and the movies that I saw, but whatever.
Who cares? She's not funny. Okay, you think she might be funny in some things. But guess what? The movie she was in, you know who didn't write that?
Probably
Sarah
her. Unless she did.
Oh, she did?
I think she might have.
No, it was written by fucking writers who are now on strike because they're not getting justly compensated for the fucking work they've done. And then this bitch has the fucking audacity to be like, I'm not getting compensated for the things I did because AI. And you're like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up, you stupid bitch. All right, let's move on. Geoengineering. I'm glad we thoroughly debunked that.
Oops. Moving on.
Okay.
Let's see. U.S. government plans.
Go ahead.
U.S. government plans 5-year geoengineering study. The Biden administration will implement a law passed by Congress to study geoengineering as a way of slowing global heating.
Can I say something about that summary sentence?
Sure, you may.
If you go to whitehouse.gov, it'll actually say this was a congressionally mandated report that we had to issue based on the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022 and the Office of the OSTP, Office of Science and Technology Programs, I think it's called, which is under some other government agency. I think the Department of Commerce. Right? So I actually spent fucking 30 minutes scrolling through the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022. And the only thing I fucking learned was like I couldn't find it anywhere. And I put the acronym in there and it came up once. And the only place that acronym came up in the build at the whitehouse.gov sites is where it's like, we're not even allowed to coordinate with we're not allowed to spend any money studying weather or any other fucking science and technology related stuff with China. Like, we're not allowed to spend money on like joint projects studying the weather with China. Which I think is fucking absurd and also just shows how fucking the jingoistic kind of or xenophobic kind of rhetoric seeps its way into the way that our government conducts itself. And then every other acronym that came up was those 4 letters together in the word postpartum, because apparently there's a lot of programs related to women's health. And so like there was 20 when I searched for that those 4 letters together, that acronym, there were there were like 26 different entries, and only 2 of them were the actual acronym for the office, and then the other 24 were not related at all. And I thought it was, so I couldn't find where it said that, but it said congressionally mandated, which means like Republicans made us talk about this, right? And I think that fits within, because I was looking for a video clip and I saw some Fox News stuff, and of course they're like fear mongering, like they just want to control our weather because they want to control every aspect of our lives and blah blah blah. When the reality is like they're like, all right, we're not going to stop burning fossil fuels because that's not politically feasible. Maybe there's some way we can avoid like overheating the planet and murdering like billions of people.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think they even really care about the billions of people because you only need to manage that for a short term.
Yeah, but they're
And then
concerned about being able to eat.
yeah, true. Well,
All
that's why
right,
they're
go ahead.
doing all the automated stuff.
Yeah, go ahead and read.
Automate everything you can. Let's see. The U.S. Congress had mandated an inquiry into techniques that could theoretically cool the Earth to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Stuff like seeding the clouds at lower altitudes with reflective particles and reflecting or using aerosols. I could swear we had a thing about aerosols a while back, and the general consensus was
Aerosol
bad.
masking effect. Yeah,
Yeah. And then, of course, the more high tech stuff like space mirrors.
yeah, like
I'll,
the mirror, MEER, mirror reflection framework that I was talking about earlier.
yeah. Let's see. The Biden administration is moving forward with a 5-year study of geoengineering techniques and is called for input. Let's see. They're going to do a report with all the definitions, capabilities required to model, analyze, and observe. Let's see. Climate impacts from an Earth's radiation budget. Oh man, that is in the red. And the coordination of federal research and investments to deliver this assessment to manage near-term climate risk and research and climate intervention.
So one thing, and I'm not sure if it's in this article or in a different article I read, is that the different approach in this study is going to be risk versus risk, which I think is fascinating
Mhm.
because like it's kind of fundamentally acknowledging that like, hey, there's a lot of fucking danger in doing this. So we're going to assess the dangers of geoengineering versus the dangers of not doing anything,
Yeah.
which I think is really the right way to approach it because no matter what you do, it's always a trade-off, right? And too often I think especially in like local government when they do it, like they just ignore the trade-offs because they're like, fuck it, whatever. We're just gonna build this 300-acre development of fucking single family homes and whatever. We don't think it's gonna hurt anything when it's like they don't ever approach it risk versus risk, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and then I think back to that one town that we talked about, or near here that basically doesn't have water anymore because the well ran dry, and they don't have access to any river water.
Yeah. And we stopped for lunch in a town called Arlington, Oregon, which is like the Columbia River separates Oregon from Washington at that part of Oregon in what is that, Eastern Oregon. And so it was technically in Oregon, but we were like, if you had a really good arm, you'd be a stone's throw from Washington. But the Columbia River is like fucking, I don't know, it's like 1,000 feet fucking wide there. Um, but they're like, we don't drink the water. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah, go fucking wash your hands or something in the bathroom. And it like smells like sulfur. And so
Oh,
then I looked up and it did. It fucking smelled terrible. And it probably tasted horrible, but I wouldn't put it in my mouth.
how do you
Um,
cook food?
oh, they use fucking
Bottled water?
filtered or bottled water. Yeah.
Great.
At any rate, so then I look up the town and I was like, they gotta have the water company's gotta have like some kind of like test. Like the EPA requires like municipal governments and or private water companies to like test the water, right? So I looked it up and sure as shit on their like podunk fucking small town, I think there was like 600 people that lived in this fucking town. It's on the interstate. So like they they did get people like us stopping in to get gas or food or whatever. Um, but I looked at the water report and it's like, oh no, like none of these things are out of EPA limits for
Right.
municipal drinking water supplies. And um, it was so important to the town. I realized when I was like searching for it that it's on the fucking website. Like the city's website has like all of the previous year's reports available on the city's website. But then the people that were lived there and that were running the business were like, because I was like, oh, I just need to fill my water bottle or whatever. I don't need to like buy a bottle of water. And they're like, we don't fucking drink
Mm-mm.
this water. So we had to buy bottled water. And those people who live there are like, yeah, we just buy bottled water. And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of things that are beyond the scope of this conversation here, but like, imagine if we spent a fraction of the money that we're spending now on cluster fucking munitions sending to Ukraine, which are like banned in most countries around the world because of like there's always like unexploded ordnance that kills civilians with those cluster munitions.
Mm-hmm.
If we spent a fraction of the amount that we've spent on fucking on direct military aid to the Ukraine, we could probably fix the water systems. And like everybody's like, oh, Flint, Michigan, or whatever, Detroit, or whatever, all these big cities that have like old water systems and this, that, and the other thing. But here's this community, and I couldn't help think, it's like, you know why fucking Trump fucking won in 2016? Communities like this who feel fucking neglected and like they can't even drink their fucking water.
Who are
And
neglected.
instead of like people being like, oh my God, you can't drink the water in fucking hundreds or thousands of small communities across the country. They're like, you can't drink the water in this, one city in Michigan. And they obsess over like a single city when like the fucking undrinkable water is like a nationwide thing.
Yeah, the bigger picture's not, or is being overshadowed. Yeah,
Right.
and that really is terrible. And how do you get that message out though when everything is all about Flint and all about whatever the name of that town was? Dang it.
East Palestine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, already forgot.
All right, continue on.
Right on. So governments still provide massive subsidies, both direct and indirect, to the fossil fuel industry. No one has yet figured out a way to link the harm done to the environment by carbon and methane emissions to actual financial consequences.
Yep.
Like,
No risk versus risk.
no, yeah, like no
When
carbon
we when
tax,
we
no nothing.
when we renew a fucking gas lease, or when we opened up what's the oil field in Alaska that the Biden administration
Oh,
approved?
the N-word. It
No,
was like,
no, not the wildlife refuge. There's another area of
oh,
Alaska
okay.
they opened up. I think it was outside of the wildlife refuge, but it's
Oh,
Alaska.
yeah,
It's all environmentally sensitive, right?
yeah.
I mean, everywhere is environmentally sensitive, but Alaska is particularly so because it's not impacted by urbanization in quite the same way a lot of other communities and places are. But still, like there was no risk versus risk. Like they're like, oh yeah, it's going to contribute to climate change, sure, but and it's going to hurt wildlife or whatever. But like there wasn't really like a full accounting of what is the consequence. Remember, I think we covered it, and what did we read? It was like it will provide 1% of the daily consumption in the United States,
Yeah, it was tiny.
or 2%. It was tiny,
Yeah.
insignificant. And so they're gonna fucking destroy like hundreds of thousands of acres potentially of like wilderness, or not really wilderness. There's a community there, but like of fairly
Things,
unimpacted
yeah, things are getting destroyed.
nature. Yeah, they're going to destroy a large area of fairly unimpacted, currently unimpacted nature to provide 1% of American consumption for like 15 years or something. And so there's no risk versus risk. Like,
Yeah.
what is the fucking, like, is this worth it? Is this, is the risk of this worth the risk of not doing it? If we don't have that 1% of energy consumption, what is the consequence of that?
There
You don't look at
is,
it.
well, I
Yeah, go
mean,
ahead.
there is a big, I hate using the word battle because I don't like putting everything in terms of fights, but kerfuffle in Maine over lithium
Oh yeah.
deposits. Basically, as like recently as a year ago, the government seemed to be all about like, hey, we're going to make sure that we don't, rent these out to anybody or lease it out or whatever you want to call it. And then now they flip flop and they're like, well, it's really valuable, and we're doing the planet good by making it so we can have have electric cars and all that crap. And it's like, but I mean, it's going to ruin that area like completely. And if you like look at a map, it's just fucking green outside the borders.
Yeah. I'm going to step away for just a second.
Gotcha. Let's see. Some people will take comfort in saying that we'll find a way to science our way out of the climate emergency. At the last possible moment, some new technology will magically appear that will save us all from our self destructive behavior. That's a convenient and comfortable myth. Yeah, it's definitely not going to be a silver bullet or anything like that. And a lot of it just seems like a terrible idea for reasons we've already discussed. Let's see. With regards to geoengineering, this guy, Chris Field, has said, until recently, I thought it was too risky, but slow progress on cutting emissions has increased motivation to understand techniques at the margins like solar geoengineering. Goes on to say that it's not ready yet, but it should be studied nonetheless. The impacts are too many and costing too many lives. Oh, and wrecking economies. For his tastes. Previous attempts at running experiments for solar radiation management, SRM, have faced strong opposition. Let's see, in Sweden, there was a research project that was halted after environmentalists and indigenous leaders said, "Hey, don't do that." Let's see.
The risks of researching solar engineering have been overblown, according to an expert at the University of California at Los Angeles. And I will say one thing I really like about RFK, and I know we don't talk about electoral politics,
Oh, we
although
do.
it's clear I'm simping for RFK Jr.
You are, man. How does
I
that
mean,
Kennedy dick taste?
just look at his abs, bro. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, one thing I like about him is he's just like, let's research it. He's like, we don't spend enough money asking fucking questions and funding research. Research
Yeah,
is funded primarily by for-profit companies that need research to justify the things they're doing rather than doing research for the sake of expanding knowledge and having good data for making decisions.
it sounds like this a particular thing was all NIMBY. Like, no one wants this because you're putting shit up in the atmosphere and you don't
Yeah,
know
and
the
guess what?
long-term effects of it, and so of course people are going to be opposed to it.
I'm glad
Yeah,
there's indigenous communities that are being NIMBY and being like, "Hey, slow down! Like, what the
yeah.
fuck? Like, let's not do this." Like, I'm more power to them. And one of the things is, and we don't have to read the whole article. It says like
Yeah.
the prospect that horrifies opponents is let's see.
Just
They would
unknown
have effective
ramifications.
political control and restrict the development of planetary scale technologies. And I think that's fair. It's kind of like, what if we had done this kind of research and had this kind of approach? You know why we have this kind of approach? Like, let's not just fucking go balls deep on shit like this.
Hmm.
Because we have things like fucking asbestos and like other things. And what are the other
Yeah,
carbons?
chlorofluorocarbons.
Yeah,
Yeah,
CFCs or
CFCs. Yep.
whatever. Lead and gasoline,
Yeah, we made a lot of mistakes. I mean, shit like mercury in paints, and
lead paint.
yeah, like we've made a lot of mistakes in the past just from not knowing things.
Yeah.
Like,
Had we done a little research on like, wait a second, like it appears there might be some health consequences of lead. Maybe let's not make it so ubiquitous that we smear it all over every fucking surface in our houses.
and use it
Right.
in pipes,
And use
like
it
in
in
Flint, Michigan.
water pipes, right, etc. So forth. And had we done that, then we could have been like, hey, in the process of studying this and in the process of looking at this, we've already started to explore other technologies and other chemical formulations for safer pipes or whatever. And we could have just fucking avoided all of that. Right? Because we could have come out with something better that like we understood the long-term consequences of it better and came to an informed decision on what to do based on, realistically speaking, even when it comes to lead pipes, based on what can municipal budgets, what taxes are people willing to pay to fund these fucking water systems?
Yeah.
Are they willing? This technology is new now. Are people willing to pay that? And if people are willing to pay that here, will that drive the cost of that fucking technology down for everybody else?
Right.
Like, what are the long-term effects or consequences or even potentially benefits of actually doing rigorous research on this instead of just being like, we need this and it's profitable, let's do it.
Right. This in particular, I've actually heard people talk about before, because humans going to human, and your average layman hears like, "Hey, there's science going on right now that's going to mitigate, CO2." They're like, "Cool, I can keep acting like I've been acting because they're taking care of it for me." That is a very real mindset.
Yeah.
Let's see. Pumping a mist of salt water into clouds to make them more reflective, or ice particles into high altitude clouds. Let's see.
So that's a big one. That's called cloud brightening.
Yep.
But basically, they observe where ocean-going vessels spew pollutants as they travel.
Sulfur,
it actually
dust,
condenses into clouds over the ocean and reflects. And they're like, "Hey, what if we just equipped ships to basically pump up seawater and mist it out and aerosolize it? Could that whiteness reflect solar radiation in a meaningful way?" And we're going to go through a pro-con list in just a moment, which shows that that's a potentially like very low impact intervention. It's not necessarily going to solve the climate. The only way to solve the climate crisis is to stop burning fossil fuels, and it's never going to fucking happen. It's never going to happen.
It literally
That's why, as much as nuclear war fucking scares me, like, I think knocking out like industrial society pretty quickly would probably be beneficial to the planet. And it's Derek Jensen, if you remember me quoting this before, in Deep Green Resistance, in one of the chapters that I think it was Derek Jensen wrote that chapter. He talks about Chernobyl and how like a nuclear meltdown worse than anything we've ever seen, and this highly toxic, disgusting mess was more beneficial for the environment in that area than industrial civilization was, because there are more plants, more wildlife, more ecosystem function, and biodiversity in these places after Chernobyl in the exclusion zone than there was when fucking people lived in Pripyat, I
believe.
Pripyat, yeah. Anyway, continue.
I like this one because we were talking about it earlier. Also, the addition of aerosols would have to be continuous to maintain the cooling. Any disruption, intentional or otherwise, would cause a sort of termination shock where bottled up warming would be unleashed in a disastrously rapid jolt. And you have to remember, we were just talking about how
aerosol masking
and people, they're just going to keep on driving trucks and
burning
shit like
fossils.
Heating their homes and all that. So.
And the aerosol masking effect, I have yet to see the scientific study that says it, but I think I might have mentioned it a while back that heat wave we had in Canada, right, which is high latitude, so it's normally very cold, and then they had a fucking huge heat wave that killed a bunch of people and shit like 2 years ago, and it was like literally came like 1 year after COVID shut down. And then you had these massive spike in heat waves in high latitudes in the Arctic, or at least in the northern latitudes, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, was that the consequence of the aerosol masking effect? We just stopped polluting because we shut the fucking whole world down for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And like all of a sudden temperatures spike in all these places that aren't supposed to be that hot. And it's like, was that because we stopped pumping pollutants into the air? Maybe fucking this is the consequence of stopping industrial civilization, which is guided.
There's no smog. There's no smog to reflect.
Right.
Terrible,
we
terrible.
call it smog, but it's a whole host of various kind of chemical aerosols. And Guy McPherson, actually, that's his big thing he pushes is that, like, with the mirror reflection framework as being what he feels is the most viable, is to intercept that solar radiation before it makes it in the atmosphere.
Mm.
Because, like, with the aerosol masking effect, is like, if we just stopped burning fossil fuels tomorrow, like, the planet's gonna fucking heat up like way faster. Because right now, even though we're causing heat trapping gases, we're also emitting various chemical aerosols that are reflecting some solar energy back. And so if we stop burning fossil fuels, the carbon is still there warming it up, but there's less masking, less aerosols reflecting energy back into space. And therefore, it's going to be this fucking catastrophic result. And I think those heat waves in Canada, research may show later that might have been the cause. I don't know. I'm just speculating based on kind of like, what is it? There's inductive and deductive. Inductive is where you look at
Deductive.
data and form a conclusion, and then deductive is you have a general set of principles, and then you look at data and say, would this data confirm or deny this principle? Is that right?
Yeah.
um yeah, and so, like, deductive reasoning would say, yeah, we stopped pumping out aerosols and they got real fucking hot. That makes sense to me. you know Anyway, so you're looking at a couple of the other ones. White roofs, you got sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide's a big one. We mentioned sulfur, I think, when we were talking about the nuclear winter hypothesis kind of being somewhat debunked. Like, still a serious fucking issue. We should not have global fucking thermonuclear war, but the nuclear winter hypothesis was based on the consequences of large volcanic eruptions over geologic history, and recognizing that, like, nuclear war would not produce sulfur or sulfates or whatever particles in the air that would necessarily block the sun for decades in the way that it would with a volcano. So it was kind of like a mismatch between, like, the analog. Like, the analog actually was substantively different than what they were looking at and trying to draw the conclusion from. Um, Space-based mirrors, that is the mirror reflection framework. They don't call it that. Why not space mirror? That's fucking beautiful. By the way, also still looking good with your new design for the fucking stream. I love it.
I haven't fixed anything, but I do enjoy it. I had to slow down the background, not since last time. Even before we started, I was like, "That's way too fast."
It was too fast, but it looks
This is
good.
well, this is half speed, and it's been this way the entire time. Yeah.
Today, the last time we did it, it was faster, I think.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. You tell me.
It wasn't. It was the same. I
Oh,
did it like prior to even starting, as it was like really getting to me. Just having
we
it
might
back.
even do quarter speed then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slow it down a little more.
Ooh, let's find out.
Okay, fields of light colored plants. Yeah, they're talking about genetically engineering plants, and they're like, oh, genetically engineering plants to take up more carbon. I was like, you know what we could do? And here's the thing I always say, it's why when I talk about permaculture, I've stopped talking about just ecological restoration in the purest sense. Let's go pre-agricultural revolution.
Okay.
And humans destroyed ecosystems and caused regional and potentially global climatic effects before agriculture. Humans can be destructive. We've cut forests down, we've done other things, but if you just go to, like, pre-agricultural and you're like, let's restore all the ecosystems that were destroyed after agriculture, when we really started transforming ecosystems for human purposes, and even if you restore all those ecosystems, you're only going to capture the carbon, potentially, maybe a
Mhm.
little bit more. I don't know a percentage, but, like, not a ton more. But you're going to be able to capture the emissions you made from land use change since the agricultural revolution. That's not going to make up for all the fucking fossil carbon we burn, though.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, let us take those deserts that before humans started doing agriculture, normal geologic change, normal planetary climactic change
Hmm.
had turned some ecosystems into not holding much carbon, and let's just fucking terraform the planet.
Yeah, green the desert.
Green the desert. Let's green the desert.
All the deserts.
Or they talk about irons. There's a potential consequences, negative consequences environmentally of like iron particles, I guess, to like which serve as some kind of like base for
sea life to
photosynthetic algae to
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
grasp onto.
Yeah,
can
and then
suck
you
up
got to
more
worry about
carbon
algal blooms though. But I
that
mean,
kill fish.
yeah, yeah.
And
But I
yeah.
mean, it's a good idea in general. You
Oh,
know,
you are on the Christian Science Monitor. We're looking through that
yeah,
now.
if
Okay, can you
only.
scroll back to the top and then say your thought?
Okay, I was gonna say if only we had a massive, population of kids with little hope and no jobs, and we could put them to work greening the desert.
And we absolutely could. And the beautiful thing is, and that's not on here at all. They're like genetically engineering trees to
Right,
pull
right.
down more carbon. And you're like,
Or at
trees
space.
pull down carbon. We just need to plant more trees.
Yeah, these two are just kind of ludicrous on the face. Like, unless you're basically saying, like, hey, every airplane that flies and every, ship above a certain size that sails has to put in things that make these two happen every time they fly. Who's going to do it? You're basically are you just paying someone to do it? That doesn't make sense. And I do like this one where it's fields of light colored plants, perhaps genetically altered to be reflective. Con might cause unintended consequence. Like, for a summary, great. I'd love to read the actual report though and see what the unintended consequences were. We're gonna blind birds.
Yeah, or whatever, right? Like, or less solar radiation reaching the surface, so soil bacteria it metabolizes more slowly,
Yeah,
and would slower metabolism of soil organisms lead to less actual carbon sequestration in the
you,
soil,
you know where that could
etc.
work though. Deserts.
Yeah, yeah, especially if they engineer or even just through traditional breeding programs, breed cam plants.
Oh, ones that photosynthesize at night.
Yeah, ones
Yeah,
that photosynthesize at night. Yeah, exactly. Because there's three photosynthetic pathways,
yeah,
and C3 is the most common. C4 is a lot of grasses are C4, which is why they look at things like corn and switchgrass and like all these other things to be like
yeah,
biofuels, is because they can fucking photosynthesize when it's hot as shit.
yeah.
Um, most plants do not. So anybody that's like, oh, plants like carbon, they're going to photosynthesize more. It's like most plants don't photosynthesize more when it gets hot. They stop photosynthesizing at 94 degrees,
Hmm.
roughly,
Yeah.
depending on the plant. I've read anywhere from 94 to 100 degrees. Any C3 by 100 degrees, no C3 plant is really photosynthesizing. And C4 plants can photosynthesize quite a bit warmer than that, but not a whole lot warmer. But they'll continue to photosynthesize on the high end of that, like say 98 to 105 or something like that.
Hmm.
And then cam plants, they can be in any temperature because they photosynthesize when it's dark outside,
Yeah.
which is a fascinating adaptation. Plants are fucking really interesting, and evolution is fascinating. And the fact that we have a way to photosynthesize where they can store the energy from the sun, but actually
Yep.
do the chemical process of photosynthesis when
When it's
there's no
cooler.
sun shining
Yeah.
is fucking, it's just fascinating. So yeah, if they can make cam plants,
Yeah.
I forget what cam stands for, but it's mostly desert plants photosynthesize at night.
Yeah.
Cacti and shit like that. They're all cam plants. Or I assume they're all cam plants. I mean, every plant is different, but in a general statement, cam plants are desert plants that keep their stoma closed during the day
In
so they're
order to
not
conserve
leaking
water.
water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then they do the photosynthetic chemical process
Gotta
of
keep that
converting
butthole
water
tight.
and carbon dioxide. Yeah, when they're losing less water through
Yeah.
the stoma. At any rate, like a lot of these, I think the spraying ocean, I mean, if you could put some pumps and misters on a fucking shipping vessel,
Mhm.
why not? Why not have every ship that's crossing
Yeah.
the ocean just
Yeah.
being like,
And we already regulate so much shit. Why not one more thing?
Well, and I mean, and this could be like every fucking transoceanic vessel could be like contributing to this kind of reflective, and really the ocean temperatures are a big fucking deal. So if we could like, and also ocean clouds, I'm like, I mean, the thing is too is like, let's not go balls to the wall and put like fucking a 500,000 or 1,000,000 fucking seagoing vessels spraying salt water in to create clouds. Like, let's maybe start with a little bit in a particular region and then see if that affects a regional climate before we commit to that like globally, right? Like,
Make the
um,
cruise liners do it.
yeah, like let's get rid of fucking cruise ship industry altogether.
I think it is pretty ridiculous, but
Well, dude, and they, you know, they
people I know
got,
want to go on it.
but guess what, dude? Those fucking companies, COVID, we fucking subsidized the fucking cruise ship industry to the nines with COVID. Like they got so much money, and it's like, but why? Why are we subsidizing this thing that's like for entertainment? We don't.
Correct.
I mean, I guess in a lot of ways we subsidize other things. In fact, being in aviation and being back on an airport, Coeur d'Alene is a vacation destination for rich people. I was mentioning last week that fucking Kim Kardashian fucking has a Gulfstream. She flew in here, and John Elway, I guess, was here the other day, and his private jet and all this other stuff. At any rate, and then you find out like that the public is footing the fucking bill for the airport, for the air traffic services, for the pavement they put on the ground. Like, and the reason governments do that, and I remember this with the city of Chico, is like they're like, oh, but it creates jobs. And I'm like, right, let's do like this risk versus risk analysis I was talking about, which I think is like kind of like a really interesting or important framework to start approaching problem solving. Is like what's worse, basically. Like
Right.
what's it's in risk versus risk is essentially like the old moral philosophy of utilitarianism, right? Like
Well, and then in that
what's
case,
going
it's
to
like,
be the
hey, what's
most
more
beneficial to the
beneficial?
most people? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's going to be most beneficial? Paying for all this shit for a few rich people to come in, hoping that their tourism dollars will add up to that, or owning up to the fact that tourism dollars for that small of a town are never going to add up to enough.
Yeah. Or just saying like, well, the town here finds it economically beneficial because they don't bear the entire cost of fucking providing that.
Yeah.
Because that cost is spread amongst all the taxpayers in the United States.
Yeah.
When
So
they're say we're going to put $40 million into improvements in this airport that it's mostly used by fucking rich people.
right.
The local community isn't putting up $40 million. And so I was kind of almost thinking, I was like, how would I approach a research project to really dig deep and figure out how much we're subsidizing this really carbon intensive method of travel, primarily used by fucking very affluent people, and how much are regular American citizens who are paying more at the gas pump, they're paying more in electricity to keep their fucking houses cool enough to be comfortable in these fucking heat waves that are driven by climate change. Like, how much are we paying not only more for ourselves, but more we're paying more because we're also paying for fucking other people to live extravagantly, you know?
Yeah.
All right, what do we got? Artificial trees, ocean fertilization with iron or other nutrients. We talked about
I watched a video about
aerosol
this.
masking with or mere reflection. We talked about spraying the ocean or either sulfur or ocean salt water. And there's a few other, but the study, the first article we read that was talking about the White House, they're only looking at two.
Right.
They're looking
Aerosols
at
and the misting, I believe.
yeah, seawater aerosol and sulfur seeded by
Yeah.
plane, which are
This
both
one
things that have to be done every fucking
constantly,
day.
which of course appeals to the government because then they can give their buddies contracts.
Yeah,
Um,
there's military industrial complex. Maybe we can stop having being in places like Afghanistan for 20 years and then instead just pay these contractors to fucking fly planes instead of doing signals intel or dropping bombs.
yeah,
We can pay these planes to just spray fucking sulfur in the air.
exactly. I
But
saw a
what are the
video
things
on
about
these
it not
ones.
sorry, real quick. What are the benefits of it not being something you have to do constantly?
Mhm.
Is if you see a feedback that's like, oh shit, this is really bad,
You
you
can
can
quit.
stop
Yeah.
doing it and
Yeah.
itll correct itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Versus like
that's why
dropping
you
iron
gotta
cells.
that's why
Yeah,
you
go
gotta
ahead.
give it a try. I mean, like, give it a try, see what happens. Don't do it on a large scale. Do it in a controlled fashion. I saw a video on these, and for the most part, I think these are very bad misnomers, the artificial trees, because they don't do the one thing that trees do really well, which is shade things. Because
Uh,
it's got to be made out of some bendable, translucent, or yes, transparent material, so that sunlight can get to the algae inside of it. And so, like, in order to act like a tree, you'd have to do big arches, and it's really hard to find a material that can stand up to that. And you definitely don't want something where if someone with bad intentions comes up and throws a rock at it, it shatters. And so it's like, well, okay, cool, it can remove the CO2, but that's only one aspect of a tree. The other aspect is shade. And
yeah.
uh, there were some good pros to it, though. Like, hey, if it's near sewer lines, or near anything where you don't want the infrastructure to be destroyed, hey, at least you're doing something about it. As long as everything is done, with clean energy, I guess. There is such a thing.
Yeah. And one of the things on the mirror reflection framework is oh no, I'm almost out of battery. God damn it, I'm at 8%. So we have to wrap
Well,
quick.
yes, we are in an hour too. So,
So we're over an hour. Yeah, an
oh,
hour and
that one's
10, which is
16
great.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, with the mirror reflection framework, one of the cons of it was that it's fucking astronomically expensive.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, you have to get all that reflective material into space somehow, and assemble it, and keep it aligned. Yeah. It would
But
probably
I mean,
just
it's
end up
probably
being. I mean, it would probably just end up being like little triangular bits that were really thin that you just kind of poofed into orbit out past all the satellites.
yeah.
And
I've heard of
yeah,
solar panels or other things to convert solar radiation or sunlight
that's a
into
terrible idea, and here's why. Go ahead.
usable fuel,
Uh-huh.
so that when spacecraft
Okay.
go
Yeah.
extra orbit, there's now like an actual here it's being converted into like a liquid or a solid fuel of some kind that could then be used for
Okay.
interplanetary travel or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, as long as you don't put it back on the planet. Because I've definitely heard of people who are like, oh, we could have, solar panels on the moon and then beam the energy back to Earth. And it's like, okay, you just added to the energy budget of the Earth.
Well, I've
Bad
heard.
thing.
I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson mentioned that. He's like, because Joe Rogan's like, well, what if you just transmitted energy? He's like, yeah, but it's energy. So
Yeah.
like, if you're transmitting that energy and something gets between that, it gets hit by that energy.
Well, not
Like,
just that, but once it's
it's
on the
not
planet,
safe.
now you took something that would have missed the Earth and you put it on the Earth. So you basically like are harvesting more energy at a time, and we don't need as much as we have.
Which is a different way to get to the same consequence of fossil fuels, where fossil fuels were
Exactly. Yeah.
energy that came to Earth that was then stored in chemical form and then later tapped into to create industrial civilization.
Yeah.
You'd be doing something similar where you take energy that doesn't exist in the daily budget,
Hmm.
but was actually like a small surplus from the daily budget that was stored very slowly over a long period of time,
Right.
and then just releasing it all at once. But
Yeah.
that same thing of like, yeah, if you transmit energy from one place to another through the air, that energy is still passing
Well, and
through
being used
space
at the end,
and
and being converted to heat, because people will
right.
use it to charge their iPhones, and then that becomes heat. Like, I have seen so many people talk about this, and I've never gotten a satisfactory answer for
Come
that.
back 94
Yeah.
if we're done here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're good. But yeah,
I
I've never heard anyone give it like a real answer about like, hey, you're just adding energy that would have missed. Like, the only acceptable way to do energy generation and transmit it back to the Earth is if it is in between the Earth and the Sun anyway. Then you're cool.
Yeah. Well, we talk about these things because it's relevant to our lives, whether I think that this is the future or not. I don't. We might do some things like spraying ocean seawater, but realistically, none of these things are going to be deployed at a scale that's going
Right.
to offset the continued emission of fucking carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases due to burning of fossil fuels and industrial activity. And we talk about things like AI because it's just the world we live in, even if we don't think it's relevant to humanity 100 years from now or 50 years from now, we're still going to talk about it. And I think this was a great conversation. I think it was worthwhile, and I think had a fairly intelligent discussion about just these two items. Just a couple articles. It shows how easy it is to throw together a show, right? I was just like,
YouTube.
these things are kind of interesting. I was like on my break, like fucking flipping through my phone, being like, oh, that's kind of cool. Click, click, click. Oh, that's kind of cool. Click, click, click. And it all came together.
Yeah.
And this has been with Applause Podcast, a podcast where two friends talk about the events and ideas and technologies that will shape our uncertain future. And here at With Thunder's Applause, we believe that when liberty dies, it dies
with thunderous applause. Now for Dancing Baby Yoda.